It is another episode of the Talkin Texans podcast, and we are less than 3 days away from the start of the NFL season for your Houston Texans as they head to Baltimore to take on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. I am Paul Galactic, the Paul Galactic, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 from 10 to noon every single weekday. He is DJ Denime. He is the Houston Texans beat writer for ESPN. Now, before we dive headfirst into that game, DJ, we did have an update since the last show that we did. We found out that Texans right tackle, Titus Howard, he's going to be out for the first 4 weeks of the year. The hand injury that he suffered in early August has not recovered enough. He was placed on the injured reserve, and that puts the Texans and specifically CJ Stroud in the line of fire. You've been out there at Texans availabilities the last couple of days. What's going on the offensive line as we head into the first game of the year?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Titus Howard going on injury reserve did not surprise me, mainly because I've seen his hand. When we saw him at practice on Monday, he had a full cast, and he was telling me, like, you could play with a short cast, but you can't play with a full cast because you can't bend your wrist.
Right.
So that was one indication that he's obviously not as close to returning as we initially thought, especially since he broke his hand on pass pro. So that's something you kind of want to take your time and get back, let him fully heal. So when he gets back out there won't really be any issues and any lingering effects in that regard. So I wasn't necessarily surprised that he went on IR, mainly because he, based off of what I had heard and talking to him a little bit, it didn't seem like he was that close to returning.
Those is are tricky injuries too.
Right.
When it happens to your hand, small bones. As someone who's broken both my wrists, flag football, get this. When you break that, you have to have like a cast on for a very long period of time. Now, again, football injury versus real life injury, who knows? But my assumption was that, okay, this is something where, yeah, he can't bend his wrist. He's not going to actually be able to push his hands into people.
Yeah, exactly. So me hearing that he was on IR, because I didn't think week 1 was real. I thought maybe week 2, maybe week 3. I was hoping, okay, he'd be back by the Steelers game, because again, like that's a top tier front seven, but obviously he's gonna miss that game too. So that is a big loss. I can't minimize that. I know I've been the one saying pump the brakes. It's not like the O-line is still not in shambles. Relax, stop overreacting. But I have to acknowledge that this is a big loss in the sense of, like, George Fant is serviceable, fine tackle, but Titus Howard played like one of the best right tackles in the league last year. So that is a massive loss. And then you add that on the fact that you lost your center, you lost your left guard, and you lose your right tackle. So at left guard, I think Josh Jones is going to start there. And then center is going to be Patterson. I mean, better center, they lost 2 starters, right? You lost Scott Quisenberry.
And you lost your Scruggs.
You lost your Scruggs. So, yeah, you basically lost 4 starters on the offensive line.
It's nuts. And I'm trying to think, DJ, off the top of my head, what's going to hurt CJ Stroud the most, because think about it from a just center to quarterback exchange, just the actual snap itself.
Right.
You're going into Baltimore, which is one of the louder crowds in the NFL. And it's the first game of the year. Everyone's going to be ready to go. First game in the NFL, and you're working with a 6th-round draft pick center. Nothing against him. He can't help where he was drafted. But you got to develop a cadence. You got to develop a rapport with one another. I'm hoping the weeks leading up to it are going to help them. So that's the center position. You also have at left guard a guy coming in who, in Josh Jones, has some versatility, but you're like, well, what's going to happen when he's in there?
He's never played left guard before.
Right.
In the league, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at right tackle, okay, at least George Fant is somebody that we have seen play well in the NFL before, both with the Seahawks, with the Jets. So at the very least, okay, maybe that's not going to be a disaster. But on the interior, man, it does make me very nervous when it comes to CJ Stroud's first game in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you have that many moving pieces, it can make things tricky, especially when I left guard. So, like, basically this offensive line, this starting iteration of the offensive line hasn't had that many snaps together.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm going to anticipate some miscues. I'm going to anticipate some sacks where a guy comes in free because of the lack of chemistry in that regard.
False
But
starts.
right. I don't think the sky's falling from the offensive line. I obviously acknowledge that with Tyler Howard being out for 4 weeks. That is a concern, but I don't think the sky's falling mainly because you still have Ray Laramie, you still have Shaq, and Josh Jones has played well in the NFL, been a decent player. He's going to be playing a new position, but he'll be playing next to Laramie Tunsil. That helps a lot. Center, it is what it is. He had a 6th-round pick out of Notre Dame. He didn't give up any sacks his last year in college, but it's more about than just giving up sacks. Most centers don't actually give up sacks.
Right.
In all actuality, because most teams don't blocking. Oh, most centers don't. They usually double team with somebody. It's rare where they're going one-on-one with a zero-tech defensive tackle coming head-on, trying to beat them. It's rare where they get one-on-one opportunity. So most times they're always blocking in conjunction with somebody. So I think for pass protection, I'm not actually that worried. But I think in the run game is where I could be a little concerned.
Yeah. So it's going to be up to Bobby Slowick to find a way to minimize the inexperience together on this offensive line for the first time he's an offensive coordinator in the NFL.
Yeah, so I think he's gonna to limit the amount of times he calls a 7-step drop because that could cause some issues. Obviously, up the middle and at the tackle spot with George Fant, right? Not saying that Fant can't hold his own out there, but when you have a bunch of injuries on the offensive line, you gotta be careful, right, of not putting CJ in those weird positions or those uncomfortable situations where because you're calling something that the whole entire line hasn't really done together often, especially in a game-like atmosphere, that can cause some confusion and some issues on the offensive line and from a protection standpoint for CJ. I would say you're gonna have to be able to run the rock, but really lean into the fact that this is an outside zone running scheme. Really lean into that and try to maximize that because then you'll be able to minimize the interior to an extent, right? To an extent. And it's a good thing that you have Damian Pierce who has good vision. So he'll be able to, if let's say hypothetically, do an outside zone going to the right side and Patterson doesn't necessarily execute his double team block to the best of his ability, you still have Damian Pierce who can make something out of nothing to keep the offense on schedule. So really utilize outside zone, utilize play action boots where you get CJ out of the pocket, making it a half field read, easy reads, things of that nature. So I think that's how you can mitigate the offensive line issues to an extent, right? And then again, if you can keep it in 3rd and 5 and 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 4s, now you don't have to worry about the offensive line who hasn't played together that often blocking for an exuberant longer amount of time, because even with Josh Jones, right, he's going from right tackle to left guard. So he's changing a lot of his techniques and things of that nature.
Yeah, you're almost doing it like from a mirror. Offensive linemen talking about moving from one side to the other side. It's always interesting to hear it. And it's a lot more difficult than it seems to people like us who haven't actually played the position. But you ain't kidding because it's not just, the offensive line too. Okay, you want to get in those 3rd and 5 and 3rd and 6s because you want your wide receivers to get open as quickly as possible. And I think it's fair to assume at this moment in time, it's going to be tough for the Texans receivers to do that. So lots of obstacles for the guy that we haven't really focused on yet on this show, CJ Stroud.
Right.
The offensive line, it's the wide receivers. I guess just given all those obstacles, what's a realistic expectation for CJ Stroud in this first game? Because I think, DJ, both you and I, we will be grading on an extreme curve for the first couple of weeks of the year. He's obviously a rookie quarterback, but this makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I have my laptop pulled up. So starting quarterbacks and that dropped in the top 5 going into week 1, that were, week 1 starters since 2011. Their record is 4-6-1. Overall total QBR 44.9, completion percentage 59.4, 22 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. So what I'm kind of expecting, and that's out of 11 people, I'm kind of expecting just get over 60% or around 60%, average roughly, 250 yards passing. Because, I mean, the average yards passing per out of that entire crop is 276. So I'm not going to set it at TJ needs to throw for over 300 yards, but I'm going to set it to hopefully we can get over that 225 mark, close to that 250 mark, mainly because it is week one and Bobby Slowick has never called plays before. So the Ravens defensive coordinator doesn't necessarily have a great beat on what he's going to do, on the fact that there's no actual film on CJ outside of the fact that if you pressure him, he might not be able to handle that, which is normal for all rookie quarterbacks. You know what I mean? So I think that's the goal in that capacity, is to be in that range, right? 60% completion percentage, 225 yards to 250, 2 touchdowns. I'm gonna expect an interception. Like, that is what it is. It's gonna happen. Like, it's 22 touchdowns to 13 interceptions out of the rookie quarterbacks from top in the top 5 that week one start. So I'm gonna expect an interception. But if you can go 1-1, 2 for 1, 60% completion percentage, 225 yards to 250 yards, I'm good with that.
From a numbers perspective, I would be good with that too. I'm almost assuming the worst when it comes to the numbers. I don't think it's going to be pretty at the end of the day. I guess what I'm looking for, DJ, is sort of what I was looking for in the preseason, where it's a matter of, is Stroud going to know when to throw the ball away? Is Stroud going to know when to give up on a play? Say all of a sudden he gets absolutely bull rushed, there's nowhere to go. Is he going to run 15 yards back like he did against the Patriots, or is he going to turtle it up? He's going to have to learn how to turtle it. And, he didn't get hit a lot at Ohio State. I don't think that should be held against him necessarily. I feel like he had an interesting answer after that first game, saying like, yeah, I actually kind of wanted to feel a little bit of that contact, but I think he's going to feel that contact a lot. So it's a matter of, if he can't get the ball out quick in this system, awesome. That means the receivers are doing their jobs. That means that they will probably actually have decent numbers at the end of the game. But for me, I'm more looking for a young quarterback that is willing to take the L from time to time, because taking the L, if it does not come with a turnover, that puts the game in the hands of your defense, which at the very least this year compared to last year, there are higher hopes for. We like the secondary. I know you've brought it up all off season,
right?
Just how good you feel about the secondary. The linebackers have to be better by default. The defensive line has to be better by default. Can CJ Stroud game manage? And I hate to throw that word out there because it gets overused and it turns into an insult from time to time. But can he do that and put the game in the hands of his defense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, you're still gonna have Damian Pierce, you're still gonna have Dalton Schultz, where in the run game,
Singletary.
Dalton's a good blocker. So you'll be able to have moments where you're able to create advantageous situations where CJ isn't asked to throw from 3rd and 10 a bunch of times, where he could be in 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 4. Or Damian Pierce can bust a decent run and get the team into field goal range or scoring position, things of that nature. It's just the only thing is the Baltimore Ravens last year were 3rd in rushing yards allowed. They allowed 89 yards rushing last year, I believe. So it's like, damn.
Yeah.
like the way the Texans probably preferably want to play for CJ Stroud's debut is where the Ravens excelled at, which is stopping the run, forcing 3rd and longs. Because last year they were top 3 in scoring defense, and they basically brought everybody back outside of Marcus Peters. What does help them is there's a chance that it's not likely that Marlon Humphreys, their star cornerback, is going to play. So if he doesn't play, that gives the receivers, I guess, not more cushion, but that's an advantage for them, right? Because the Ravens cornerback group without Marlon Humphreys is not one of the better groups. It's a bottom tier type of group without Marlon Humphreys. So if that's the case and he's not out there, I think the passing attack from the receiver spot on the perimeter has a chance to actually make things happen.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to hear. And they are a group that features a guy that we haven't seen a whole lot of. I hope we see more Tank Dell in this game. I hope he's the secret weapon. I'm not expecting too much, though, just given what we have seen from him, or what we haven't seen from him with the first unit thus far in the preseason. Right. So we look at this game as a whole, DJ. The Ravens are 9.5-point favorites per mybookie.ag. I wonder if that line changes as we get closer and closer to game time. We talked about the limitations of the offense right now. You did mention that you at least like the receivers more than maybe others are going to like them this week. Where do the Texans match up well in this game against a very consistent, veteran Baltimore team led by one of the better quarterbacks in the game.
I think they could match up in the passing attack, mainly because as we talked about, they have the defensive back to match up with their receivers / tight ends. Obviously, Mark Andrews is a beast, all-pro caliber player. So I think he'll still get hits from time to time. But I think with Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson, Tavia Thomas against Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Odell Beckham, I think that line, like head-to-head, I think the Texans have the advantage in that capacity, in all honesty. So I think just when it comes down to can the Texans force Lamar into 3rd and 8-ish? And then now also comes into the philosophy, right? Like I put up some stats. Lamar against the blitz since 2018 ranks 34th in completion percentage of 58% amongst all starting quarterbacks and 20th in raw QBR. So that's interesting. I remember watching him on Thursday Night Football against Brian Flores in that defense where they basically blitzed the hell out of him and they didn't have any answers. So I don't know how much of that was Lamar, the receivers, Greg Roman. There's a lot of variables that we just don't know about what contributed to that performance where they were struggling to move the ball. And obviously next year when they played week 1, they were a little more prepared and they were able to have a lot of success through the air against the Miami Dolphins in week 2. Where Lamar had over 300 yards passing, I think over 100 yards rushing, but they still lost the game because the Dolphins engineer crazy coming out. But obviously D'Amico last year didn't blitz that much because he didn't have to, right? You got Nick Bosa, you got DeForest Buckner, you got really good guys on the back end. So I'm really interested to see what the balance is, right? I remember talking to a coach. Texting with a coach earlier this week just about okay, what is it like to stop Lamar, right? Like not stop Lamar, but what kind of goes into slowing him down,
right?
And he's just just play him straight up, don't do anything crazy disguise and things of that nature. Just play him straight up for the most part, make him throw because he's more obviously I think he's a really good thrower, but he's more dangerous if he's throwing and he's also burning you down with his legs because it's at that point there's nothing you can do, right? If you can keep him in the pocket, but he's a good pocket passer. I think that's your best shot, right? And then rush for 4, keep QB contained, be able to collapse the pocket, and make him hold the ball. Because usually, and honestly, the longer a quarterback holds the ball, the more likely something bad is going to happen. There's going to be good moments where Lamar is able to make something out of nothing and get a first down, and you throw your hands up
especially when he gets out of the pocket too, because then the play starts to really break down. But you're right, he holds on to it, and they kind of contain him. You would think that something bad could happen.
Exactly, and that's I don't want to say that's your best because that basically means that the coverage on the front end within those first 3 seconds was good, right? You forced him to hitch. Now you need the D-line to come in. If they don't necessarily come in and they don't get him down, whatever, that's cool. But now you start to scramble and trying to make something happen. That's when you can make a play on the ball. And there'll be opportunity to make a play on the ball because it'll be a scramble drill. And we all know you can't survive off a scramble drill.
No, you can't. No. Now, I'm also wondering about the pass rush. When I was out at the Texas availability yesterday, there was a group of reporters around Will Anderson, and I asked Anderson about going up against a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, who's obviously very different. And you run straight at a guy like Lamar Jackson, Jackson can step up, he can run back. Do you change your approach at all? And he gave an interesting answer. He said, I think that's a mistake that some pass rushers make. You have to essentially do what you normally do. Right. And I'm wondering if that maybe is a hint at just the way that the Texans are telling Anderson to play more so than it is what the actual strategy should be for pass rusher to pass rusher going up against Lamar Jackson. I'm sure he knows it a lot better than anyone, either of us. But I was intrigued by that answer, and I am curious as to what they have in store for Jackson because any defense across the NFL, Jackson's been in the league enough where there's got to be somebody on the defensive coaching staff who has been a part of a game plan against Lamar Jackson before,
Yeah,
that's just how it goes.
Right. I mean, D'Amico was on that staff. I mean, obviously Matt Burke wasn't on the Jet staff last year. He was in Arizona. But he was on the staff. He was on the staff in 2021 when they played the Eagles, and they thought they were going to get Jalen Hurts, but then Jalen Hurts' shoulder injury forced Gardner Minshew to come into the game. So I'm guessing that the game plan was going to be somewhat similar in the regard because to expect design runs and things of that nature. I think it's really going to come down to obviously I mentioned the third and long situations and trying to make Lamar hold the ball to hope that something he can make a mistake. But also think can they stop the design run attack, because I think what makes it really difficult to game plan for Lamar this in week one is the fact that he's a new offensive coordinator. So you're trying to mirror what he did well, also what Todd Monken's going to do. Because the last time he was offensive coordinator, he was with the Cleveland Browns in 2019 with Baker, and then before that he was with Jameis Winston. Those two quarterbacks are totally different than Lamar. So like you're trying to key on what Lamar does well with Mark Andrews, and also key in on what Todd Monken did well with Jameis and Baker on certain down and distances. But it's like you still don't necessarily know because it's week one. Like you're gonna see something that you're not necessarily gonna be prepared to expect. So
yeah, I think when I asked D'Amico Ryans about preparing for Lamar Jackson, also with the difference of a new offensive coordinator, he gave the impression that I think a lot of people that follow the NFL have that Monken's involved now, especially given how lovey-dovey any quotes that you might have seen between Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken this offseason have been. It's that they're going to throw a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
How they throw the football, no clue, because they love Zay Flowers. Odell Beckham Jr. is there. It is an interesting receiver core. And of course, you talked about Mark Andrews, who doesn't get nearly enough credit for being one of the best tight ends in the game. It will be interesting to see what they do if they just open it up, if they just try to throw. I kind of hope they do, and not because I don't think highly of Lamar Jackson as a passer, more because I feel like that is where the Texans' strength is. Can they get a couple of takeaways from what you said a little bit earlier? Jackson hangs in there, stands in there, and maybe puts the ball near somebody like Jalen Petrie, who's obviously very ball hawkish, or Derek Stingley maybe gets an opportunity to do something himself. Steven Nelson had his moments doing the same thing last year.
Right. Yeah. I think because again, like if you allow him to sit in the pocket, you don't pressure him, you're in trouble. You're in trouble if the coverage on the back end isn't good. So that's what I was saying. Like, okay, if the pressure up front is fine and the coverage on the back end is good, that's going to force him to hold the ball, which is going to give the D-line an extra second to get there. And if they're getting there, he's going to keep holding it. And then I turn to a scramble drill. And now you can live with that because you can't live off of that as an offense. And every offense is going to tell you can't live off of that for an entire game. Eventually mistakes will happen. And that's what kind of happened at times last year when they would because Ravens had for whatever reason, they were struggling to close out games because once teams saw everything they had, especially with Greg Roman, that fourth quarter they could really clamp down and they knew exactly what to expect, things of that nature. And then they would turn into scramble drills. Not necessarily turn into scramble drills, but sometimes there'd be moments where Lamar didn't have the weapons or the correct play call to execute these moments, and then now you have turnovers. Like I can think off the top of my head where he threw a not jump ball, but he threw a pass to the fullback because they love getting Richard involved under Greg Roman against the Giants, and they ended up in an interception, and the Giants were able to come back and win that game in the fourth. So I think that's why I don't necessarily. That's why I say if the defense plays up to their standard or their potential, they have a chance to pull off the upset. Because if you look up and it's 16-13 in the fourth quarter, like at that point, anybody has a shot, if it's 21-16, anyone has a shot. It's a one-possession game, Because we see it all the time. Most NFL games aren't blowouts. They can turn into blowouts early, sometimes they turn into blowouts late, but for the most part, fourth quarter, 80% of the teams are right there. Even last year with the Texans, right? They finished 13-3-1. Well, yeah, 13-1, not 13-3-1. I wish they finished 13-3-1 last year, but they finished 13-1 last year. The majority of their game came down to the fourth quarter, and they were regarded as a bad football team. The majority of the games came down to the fourth quarter. So
they do cover the spread, and it is 9.5 points. I'm not sure if I'm going to go there quite yet, but that's the hope. The hope is that it does not turn into the 2019 game where Baltimore won 41-7 and Lamar Jackson started to run away with his MVP campaign, where he was 17 of 24 for 222 yards and 4 touchdowns, ran the ball 10 times for 79 yards. He killed up that game.
Yeah,
I remember seeing the highlights of that one. I just had a long drive back from watching a Washington State game in Pullman, Washington. And I remember seeing the highlights. I'm like, good God.
What you doing watching Washington State, my friend?
It was fun. Wazoo is a fun place to watch a game. Doesn't mean the football is good.
That's a good point. Good point. Fair.
I had to go on the sideline. It was next to Mike Leach the whole time. R.I.P.
You know what? You got me. You got me there.
I want to go back to something really quickly because I think Mark Andrews might be the key to this game for Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do? What would you do to stop Andrews? Because with Lamar Jackson, he's Lamar Jackson. Like he's going to get his from time to time. You just hope that he's not going to run for 1,000,000 yards and then carve you up 2 for the same thing. Mark Andrews is one of the better tight ends of the game. And as you said, I think he's going to get his. What would you do? Do you match up a safety with him? Do you throw Jalen Petrie at him? Do you throw Jimmy Ward at him? Or do you try to put a linebacker on him? I mean, he's a really good player.
I think if Christian Harris plays, I think that is a intriguing matchup because he has the speed to run with Mark Andrews stride for stride. I don't think you can use a nickel cornerback. Tavier, good nickel corner. But he's 5'10", 190. Mark Andrews like 6'5". So that's a mismatch regardless, right? But Christian Harris is like 6'1", 6'2", can run, and I think he's probably their most twitchy linebacker. So that gives you a shot in terms of being able to cover him. Obviously, you got to bracket him from time to time. Yeah, bracket him. Yeah, bracket Mark Andrews with Christian Harris and possibly Eric Murray / Jimmy Ward, because Jimmy Ward might not play this week, or Petrie. And then you got to kind of let your corners on the outside kind of roam. So basically a lot of cover 4 where hopefully Mark Andrews is on the opposite side of the slot receiver if they go like 11 personnel and they go like doubles. So then you can have Christian Harris. Christian Harris can not follow him per se, but he can be in his vicinity or whatnot, and you can bracket in with Christian Harris along with having that help from the safety over top. Because you're in quarters, obviously, like that person who in the slot, whether it's a slot or a tight end, he has number 2. So now he can have eyes on the tight end while you have Christian Harris also having eyes on Mark Andrews to an extent while keeping eyes on Lamar Jackson. So, like, you can give attention in that capacity to Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews still don't get his because Mark Andrews is one of the best tight ends in the top 5 tight end. So he will still get his, but I think it's all about limiting him and letting your corners not necessarily be on the island, but let your corners guard those, let your corners guard their receiving core. Like, I like Odell. Odell was one of the most exciting players I've ever seen, in my life. But he hasn't played football since 2022 February.
Yeah.
It's 2023, September. That's a long time. You know what I mean? Zay Flowers, when we first start in the NFL, and Rashad Bateman, I think he's extremely talented, but he deals with injuries, and he wasn't participating in the entire camp. So let your corners earn their money. You know what I mean? I ain't saying go cover 0. I ain't saying that, but corners basically can turn into cover 0 if it's aggressive, right? If it's aggressive, that means the safeties are gonna jump more at like 8 yards.
It's just tricky to do that though when you got Jackson. Like you're kind of you can't really turn. He's the one guy where you have the ability to do it, but you turn your back to him like shit. It's
right.
It's hard.
I'm glad I don't have to game plan for Lamar Jackson because nothing about that seems fun.
Nope.
In terms of game, because especially in week 1 with a new offense. But I also think that since they're running a new offense, that helps the Texans, right? Because you're running a new offense, and nobody on that team has played in that offense before. Like none of the starters, that is. Where at least for the Texans, if Jimmy Ward plays, they'll have at least 2 guys that have played in that system with Jimmy Ward and Sheldon. And I mean, even Denzel Perryman said like there's some similarities from the schemes that he's been in to this one. So you'll have basically 2.5 guys where they're used to playing in that system to an extent. So that could be an advantage. How much? Who knows? But we'll see. Oh, I was looking for this stat while we were talking.
Hit me.
So when Lamar Jackson scrambled last year in 2022, he completed 8 passes off of 31 attempts for 98 yards, 1 interception with a quarterback rating of 26. So that's why I'm like, yo, like, how many times where you might want to blitz and make him scramble. So because again, like that gives you the chance. Like he might burn you, but that's a chance you have to take. That's a legitimate chance you have to take. He may burn you, but we can't ignore these numbers. You feel me? Like this from last year where he struggled with when he's in scramble mode for the most part because now it's backyard football and this is the NFL. Like you can't rely off of backyard football, And then I'm looking at, but then 2021, he went 18 for 31, 2 touchdowns, pass rate of 106. So like you kind of gotta, as I'm saying, he could burn you, but you can also get him in advantageous situations where he's running around trying to make something happen and nothing comes to fruition, especially since he's never played with Zay Flowers in the game. He's never played with Odell in the game. He's barely even played with Sean Bateman because Bateman's been hurt. And when Bateman has been healthy sometimes, Lamar's been hurt. So, like, he hasn't even played that much with Bateman. Now, obviously, he's played with Mark Andrews. I know that. He played with Mark Andrews. But, like, his main core pass catchers, he hasn't played that much with them in that regard. And then you're adding the fact in a whole new system. So, if you can force some scramble drills, whether it's through blitzing or whether it's through great coverage on the back end, where you're doubling Mark Andrews and letting your corners win on the outside, now you're creating scramble drills, and hopefully you can get the 2022 Lamar that struggled against the blitz versus 2021, who was good luck. Yeah, he was tearing people up in that regard.
I can't wait for this thing to get started. I hope they attack. I would like to see this team, for once, actually dictate anything. It's been way too long. Final predictions for Sunday. DJ, what you see happening?
I probably got I got 23-17 Ravens. I'll go Ravens win this game. Mainly because the offensive line issues are going to rear its ugly head at times. Week 1. I still think CJ has a productive game. I think those were over 225 yards. I think that Dameon Pierce gets close to 100. But I just think that Lamar and the offense and their defense makes just a few more plays to pull this game out. But I think, again, if that's the score 23-17, shoot, like you can carry that momentum into week 2 and you're going against a team that has a similar identity. They're going to have a similar identity, and you can exploit the hell out of that because, like, Anthony Richardson is Lamar, and he doesn't have the weapons that Lamar has. And his front, the Colts defense isn't nearly as good.
I hope what you say is what happens. I think it's going to be a little more one-sided. I just think it's going to be really hard for a likely one-dimensional Texans offense, given the limitations of the offensive line and given the just wide receivers who they are, even if they maybe do have a good matchup against Baltimore and a rookie quarterback. I just think it's too much in Baltimore on the road in a very loud environment. So I think Baltimore's going to win this 27-10. I imagine they pull away later. Maybe the Texans can keep it close for a while. I do think that we will see an energetic team out there. I'm excited for the DeMeco Ryans era to kick off. This is just a rough first week matchup.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't ask for a harder week 1 matchup. Only a few ones have been like,
yeah, like who we get the Cardinals?
That'd have been like, harder would have been like at Cincinnati or at Kansas City. Or
yeah, but like there's like I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 week 1 opponents that would have been more difficult than this one. This is pretty tough. And it's in Baltimore. That's a tough place to play. They're loud. They care.
Yeah. But hey, DeMeco said he's up for the challenge, so we're gonna see.
We will see indeed. He is DJ Bieneme. Make sure you're following him during the Houston Texans game on Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. I am Paul Gallant. You can follow my stuff as well along the way. So long, farewell. We will be back at it after the Texans' first game of the year against the Ravens next week. Peace.